Let me introduce our next speaker. Tim Halbach will be discussing on-site weather support at NWS Milwaukee. Go ahead, Tim.
All right, thanks, Mike. So I have a presentation here where I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey. This is not a one-size-fits-all type model, but this is just what's worked for us. I know that every office is going to be a little bit different for what kind of things are important and what kind of things we focus on there, but I want to share what we've learned and what we've done here to be able to get to the point that we're at with on-site weather support. So a little bit of background on myself. I've been the WCM here since 2015. Before that, I was a lead at La Crosse and worked at Chicago and HPC to start my career. To tell you how old I am, it's now changed names. But when I came in here in 2015, that was really when WCM positions were starting to change. Instead of being like the hero of the storm spotters, it's more so now like, what are you doing DSS-wise and leading up that effort into how you're going to take your office into providing weather support for partners. And at that time, we were a state office here for Wisconsin, and the departing MIC, Steve Bruschi at the time, was the message he gave me was do whatever you can to make Wisconsin emergency management happy at the state level. So we weren't doing anything local. Even with the state focus, we didn't have a spot at the state EOC. So it was basically a blank slate that we had. So if you're kind of facing something similar with your office and looking, where to start, hopefully this will help you out a little bit. So I'm not going to talk about winter at all. Winter's done, so we can't talk about it anymore. But I want to focus on our summer DSS. And when you got a blank slate, it can be a little bit overwhelming because, where do you start? What are the main things you need to be working on? And instead of trying to come from the weather service and just saying, here's what we're going to do, we talked with some partners and we listened to what they had to say in terms of what's important, where are the decisions being made in these different times of the year. So with the summertime, the three main things we found were storms, flooding, and heat. So the storms, lightning, thunderstorms, those public safety decision makers are the large event ones, are the ones that really needed our help the most. For river flooding, it was more so the emergency management directors, so I do sandbaggings, state level stuff. That's when we were finding they're running into the biggest issues with needing help on decision making. And then when we get heat, the health departments were the ones that were jumping in to try to jump in. So that's what we focused on with trying to figure this stuff out. So before I get into my whole spiel about what we are doing here and how we're doing it, number one, why even care about this? So you all should know our mission statement, and that the part that got added recently was the impact-based decision support services. That's part of our mission statement. For layman's terms, I tend to just basically think of it this way: we're trying to help people in public safety positions make better decisions. So we look at a weather situation, we know we can tell these people to try to make better decisions. Also, from our office, we found it helps improve the communications both internally and then also externally to the partners. And we want to try to take that burden off of ops. And I'm going to give some examples of how we put some burden on our ops to help out these partners. For the WCMs that are listening, you got a very important position in your office that you can single-handedly make your office indispensable. How are you doing that? What kind of partners are you working with? Where are you trying to expand your DSS to make it that if you go away or if the service was to go away, how are people going to react to that? Is it going to be crickets? Is nobody going to say anything? Or are you going to be, having people rallying for you to come and help out? So you have a very important job. So this is going to be a little bit of a kind of a timeline. We're going to go back to kind of when I first started to where we are now and just kind of talk about different steps along the way. So Walleye Weekend, this is my hometown, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, back in June of 2016. It's kind of a multi-part festival that goes on. It's one of the biggest walleye fishing tournaments in the nation. And you can see all the boats here with the professional fishermen going out there. But it's also got concerts, it's got a fun run, it's got 3-on-3 basketball tournaments, It's got everything, and generally about 30 to 40,000 people on a daily basis. So a lot of people, and really no shelter because it's in this big park. So on this day, we had a squall line going through the north or west central part of Wisconsin, and Friday evening of walleye weekend. So the first night, things are starting to get kicked off. People are getting excited. At the time, weather is good, so there's a lot of people there. And we start getting phone calls when the storms get out by Eau Claire, and it looks like it's headed this way. So the EM that is in a command post there is calling every 15 minutes. How's it looking? What's the likelihood that this is going to occur? And as it got closer and closer, he was calling every about 5 minutes. And something I overheard that's stuck with me in our operations from one of our meteorologists was this is getting kind of annoying. You know, the phone's constantly ringing. We're kind of having to answer the same questions over and over again. You know, meanwhile, we got this line of storms that's coming in. So that's something that resonated with me. How do we take care of that so that it's not a burden on our ops? So what ended up happening, this line did come in. It was about an hour away at the point where I think they started shutting things down. It produced about 50-mile-per-hour winds as it came through, and it did do some damage to some trees and tents that were, I think, still up there. And this became kind of our first event where we're like, how do we do this better? We got to try to figure out, with all these people, these big decisions that are being made, how do we more efficiently notify people of what's going on there without, crushing our ops? Some other things that happened along the way. This is not a thumbs up that there was flooding in the Northwoods, sorry Duluth. But in 2016, Wisconsin Emergency Management was, we weren't on site. It was just a communications breakdown all around. We didn't know when briefings were. We'd get phone calls about 10 minutes before they're about to do a briefing and want a big PowerPoint presentation. And we're like, we can't put something together in that short amount of time. And then just learning more information from what was happening in Duluth and all that. So this was the first event where they had an after action review, and we made a push that we need somebody in your state emergency operations center, and they agreed to it. 2017 was our first on-site specific weather event. The U.S. Open was in Erin Hills, which is just like 30 minutes north of our office in Washington County, west of Milwaukee. I'll talk a little bit more about that event happening there. But that was kind of our first event where an EM was going to meetings saying, "Hey, we had weather service here, and it was great. You should consider that for your events." 2017, we had our first flooding event where we were called to the state EOC. And it was very beneficial for the partners there to be able to have a liaison both from internally and also through the weather service to be able to relay information that was being received there. 2018, much like a lot of offices, you go through periods where you're short-staffed, and that tends to be when you get your most active weather. 2018 was that for us. We went down 7 people, and it just happened to be when we got all our active weather in here. So U.S. Open, going back to that first deployment that we had, and as much as I wish this quote was towards my Sioux, John Gagan here, why are you here? This was the first shift of the first day at Erin Hills at this command post, and it's a Washington County Sheriff Deputy. And he's asking this because Weather Service has never been in a command post before. Our presence never been there. A lot of people just open up their phones and look at the app, or they getting their weather information from wherever. But weather people had never been in a command post structure like this, where there's police, fire, hospital, security, whoever it might be for that event. Weather's never been there. So it's kind of like, why are you here? Well, maybe not thankfully, but we had a squall line come through that afternoon. So we were able to tell them, well, we're here to monitor the weather and let people know when bad things are coming. And we had day one that afternoon, squall line came through for the practice rounds that were happening at the U.S. Open. And that deputy came to, it was our MIC at the time, Ben Schott, that was working, and said, well, I see why you guys are here. And this tends to be a theme, which I'll share a little bit more later on here, where all it takes is one weather event for us to solidify us with partners in these command posts, for them to understand why we should be there. So another part about this was private sector. So up to that time, we'd heard a lot about like, you got to be careful. We're stepping on the toes of the private sector. I found that with this and all the other events that we work with, we work with the private sector. It's not really a competition because there's different things going on and different entities that both are taken care of. So I haven't really viewed it as a competition, but in Erin Hills, I learned a bit more about how they do their work and what their thing is. So this was Jake Zwick. He was the meteorologist from Thorgard. They have a lightning sensor that they bring along with them that they can monitor for charges of electricity building up. They could predict when that lightning was going to occur and be able to get partners or get the golfers off the course. So all that our EMs would get from them was this emailed forecast. I think they'd get it out early in the morning, and then they'd get a briefing like this later in the morning. But the focus was different for both of us. So again, this was our first time being on site and trying to figure out, what our role is. So from talking with Jake, their focus was USGA. The U.S. Golf Association paid for them to be there on site, briefing them, and they wanted unlimited access to them. They didn't want their meteorologists that they're paying to be there to be talking to the Washington County EM to say, they wanted to be able to talk to them any moment. So the EM public safety aspect was not being taken care of. So Thorgard was taking care of them. And really it was, if there's gonna be any lightning, I don't want Tiger Woods getting struck by lightning. That's gonna be a disaster for this and everything going on. So they'd have Chevy Tahoes going out into the course to whisk the golfers back to the clubhouse. They also helped out with other non-public safety type things, like if the course was too wet, they didn't want to have the pin set down in a low spot on the green. So they would be helping out with that decision making for the USGA. And then also if it was too windy, they were concerned that the golfers couldn't hit the fairway from where they were teeing off from. So that's stuff we don't need to mess with. We need to help out the EM, the Sheriff's Department, spectators. A lot of times with these golf courses, it's a lot of older gentlemen or people that are there that take longer to get back to wherever shelter might be. So those public safety people needed more time and briefings and access to a meteorologist to help out. There's a lot of questions that happen in that amount of time, and that's why picking up the phone and calling is not really an efficient way to handle that, and that's why it's important for us to be on site. All right, so moving along in our timeline of stuff, 2019, the government shutdown happens. It kind of slows things down. However, we do become staffed up at our office. And we start getting excited because there's two really big events coming to the Milwaukee area in 2020. We have the Ryder Cup, which is another big golf tournament happening up in Sheboygan County, our far northeastern part. And the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, is coming to Milwaukee in 2020. So this is our year, 2020. It's going to be awesome. We've had a ton of meetings, and I really kind of blame myself for COVID happening because I sent this tweet out February 19th, 2020. Banner year for us. We're going to be learning about Ryder Cup and all the stuff that's happening with the DNC. And literally like a month later, it was done. So I do kind of blame myself for jinxing it by sending that out. I give 2020 kind of a halfway thumbs up because, while everything was shut down, we were still able to do the DNC and kind of learn a little bit, get our names out there with Secret Service and a bunch of other partners that were in the Milwaukee area. Steph came down from region, was able to be on site at the MAC for that. So we're all set up now for 2024 when the RNC comes up, but that was kind of a disappointing year for multiple reasons. So going into 2021, we're coming out of COVID, things are starting to loosen up. People in Wisconsin, once it starts getting warm, they are out. They're out and wanting to party. And these events were starting to come up, whether or not we were ready for it or not. So we wanted to try to figure out, all right, what are the events we really want to prioritize? Because if we commit to something, it's going to be really hard to come back on and tell them next year, like, hey, something bigger, something fancier showed up for us. Sorry, we're not going to do this on-site support for you anymore. So we really wanted to think this out ahead of time, like, what are our weekends? What are our priorities different times of year? Because most of them tended to be about the same time every year. There are some that kind of float around here and there. So we made this kind of a scoring chart. So the first thing was just, what's your daily attendance? Take those points, add it to the next one. How much lead time is needed to shelter? Big golf course where it takes 2 hours plus to clear it off, that's going to get you more points. It's more vulnerable of a situation. And then the third one, the additional vulnerabilities for each one of these, we would add on a point to that. So we'd add first column, second column, and then however many of these additional vulnerabilities up. And we came up with this kind of a tiered approach. So level 1, those are events we should be prioritizing to potentially be on site for. That would be about 10 points or more. And what this really, while I got some part-time on-site support or enhanced support, really this just helped to kind of separate out what are the ones that we really need to be doing, what are the ones we could be considering, and what ones do we not need to be concerned about at this point for doing on-site support. So I have this label as 2021. I think that was actually 2022, the second year of the document that I had. I just didn't update the time, but this gives you a little bit of idea of how we separated things out. So July of 2022 here, these are the big events. And just note that for most of these, we did not have a relationship built up with any of these events at that time. We knew the EMs and we could try to work our way to try to get some connections, but at that time, we hadn't worked with a lot of these places in the past. I'll talk about county level stuff in a little bit as well, but this is how we first came up with, all right, how do we plan this out? What do we prioritize for helping out with events? And I know this is talking about on-site, but I just want to give one quick blurb about how we do our off-site support plan. So anything that's not a level 1, we do a 6 a.m. email or NWS chat briefing that the midnight shift, they can go through and they can schedule the emails to go out. If there's a bunch of events that are happening in the same area, you can lump them together and send them all out at once. 4th of July obviously becomes a big one where there's a lot that you can just kind of do that for. Anything as storms start to approach an event, we give them as early as possible heads up that it's going to be lightning or severe weather so that they can start planning out what's occurring. And then also all clears once it looks like the lightning or the threat has left that event. We've dabbled with text, but we found it to be unreliable. Iris, we were finding from partners that our messages, the SMS messages we were sending through Iris weren't making it to some of the partners, so we stopped using that. And from what we've heard from Google Voice, there can be some spamish type things that happen with that can get us blocked as well. The events do go into our warnings if we issue a warning while the event's going on. I haven't heard a ton of feedback about how much that's actually helped or hurted anything. I've seen TV meteorologists say like, hey, that's cool, but I'm not sure how much that's affected things. But that's how we do our offsite DSS events work right now. For NWS chat, we have a private events chat room that we've set up that if we mention the partner, it should notify them, do a push notification on their phone. That's how we've got it set up with a handful of test subjects right now, and the initial feedback's been pretty good about this. The idea is that if you're at a concert or loud events, calling someone and talking to them might be difficult. So if you can have something show up on their phone, that's why we wanted to do the texting. It was beneficial to have something in front of them, and Slack and NWS chat seemed like a good chance to try to do something. All right, so moving along, we have our first deployment, June 21, Walleye Weekend. Things were pretty calm for that event as well. With Road America, we had 2 events in June, mid-June, and early July. These areas are kind of in our northern areas. So Walleye Weekend, obviously, I talked about the issues they had early on in 2016. So they were like early adopters, like we want to sign up. And Road America's in Sheboygan County where the Ryder Cup was. So we had all these planning meetings with them, and that was a spot that we wanted to help out with. So one of the early things we learned, and again, this is how we've gotten to the point that we're at now, is we just tried doing things. And the more reps we got, the more we figured out what was worthwhile and what wasn't. So the initial thinking was we needed to double staff these events. So if you had Walleye Weekend, it's an evening event, but sometimes it started in the morning. We would have somebody be there for like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then somebody else would come in from 3 p.m. to 11. And the thinking was like, well, if they have briefings in the morning, we want to be there to be able to give that briefing. And what we found is that we don't need to do that. We've gone more to a model of like what the fire weather spot forecasts would be, where someone fills out a spot forecast from the DNR or whoever your burning agency is. We send them a forecast and they have their little powwow and they read off what the forecast is. So that's helped out with not overdoing it on our staff and having to burden them with having too many shifts to cover. So we did this for 1 year and then we backed off of it afterwards. So that's how we've basically viewed handling the on-site support. Also, Google. So we got really good at using Google Chat during COVID, and we set up a on-site DSS coordination room, and that's where it came in very handy once we started doing multiple events in the same weekend, so that we weren't just kind of one-offing and having direct communications with people. We could talk to all of them at once. And we're going to go to these events. We're going to get some weird food. It kind of became a thing at our office for just the culture to say, like, hey, what kind of weird thing did you eat while you're there? So this was a foot-long cheese curd that I got at State Fair, and that's a decision I made and I regretted pretty quickly. But it kind of, is a morale thing. People kind of joke about it, and we're all chatting about what's going on. So this is a part of what we do. So mid-July, the feedback's good from the EMs and partners. We haven't had too crazy weather yet, but they liked us being there to provide the briefings, and if something went down, we were there. Like I mentioned, Sheboygan County was the early adopter. We were still having a little bit of uncertainty with events and whether or not they were going to occur because COVID was still going on, but things were starting to happen and go down. I was having a hard time also. This has been kind of a theme through my WCM time, is having time breaking in with some of the larger cities. So Milwaukee and Madison are our two biggest cities. They got a lot of other stuff going on that it was more so reactionary when weather would occur. So it's been a kind of a struggle to try to get in and work with those couple. So July 2021 comes along, and I'd like to personally thank Giannis Antetokounmpo for leading the Milwaukee Bucks to their first NBA championship in about 50 years, I think it was. It led to us having breakthrough with a lot of the partners in Milwaukee. What happened was, as Bucks got closer and closer to winning the championship, the plaza, the Deer District outside of the stadium, became a hub for where everyone was coming to watch the games. And by the time it was like 2 or 3 games into the finals, they were having somewhere between 40 to 60,000 people just showing up in the Deer District to watch these games. And it became a weather concern to where they had to start opening up an EOC. And the parade finally happened. That's where I got to sit next to some of the Milwaukee County EMs, and as we're talking, I'm like, hey, this is what we're trying to do a little bit more of. We'd like to break through with like State Fair and Summerfest and some of these other big events that we haven't been able to connect with the right people. And that's where the Milwaukee County EM was able to connect me with someone at Wisconsin State Fair. We used to have an outreach booth there, and while we were there, we always tried to get in with security as well, or just try to figure out who are the right people to talk to, and we could never find the right person. So Milwaukee County EM put in a good word for us and was able to get us a meeting about 2 weeks before State Fair is about to begin. And I met with Chris and Ken, the two main guys there, and their first question is, well, like, how much is this going to cost me? And I think that's what a lot of these public safety people are, concerned with. It's this guy's making a pitch to me, like, how much is this going to run me down the road? So once they get through that initial, like, hey, you're government, we're here to help type, thing, they opened up and they're like, okay, let's give this a shot. So that week came along, and we got in their command center. We're in the conference room, and it was a little interesting at first because there's hardly anybody ever there. And we're like, the picturesque, command center from US Open. There's, lines of people that are sitting there from all these different things, but yet there's nobody in this command center. And I'm like, okay, they gave us a radio, and if something was going down, we'd call it. What we found is when we call that, everybody swarmed back into that conference room, and it became an EOC. When things are quiet, they're out doing a million different things to maintain this big event that's happening. This is where we started the double staffing, and after we got through, I think, like 2 or 3 days of active weather, we're like, we're killing our staff here. We need to just go down to 1. So on the days where it was active, we'd have longer shifts. On the days where it was quieter, we would tone that down to work about an 8-hour a day type shift. So here's Marcia Krantz. She's one of our lead forecasters. She got a really fun shift where it was constant lightning for about an hour or two. These are all the public safety people that make all the big decisions for State Fair. That room went from empty to being full as the storms were coming through. And we learned we had a lot to learn. We thought we were just going to go in and report on lightning. When, if you tell someone, hey, there's going to be lightning, and then there's a big crack of thunder behind you, it's like, well, no kidding, like that's there. We had to try to learn to anticipate when that lightning was going to occur and when it was going to be done. Our confidence was not high going through that week and what we were briefing, but we still made a very important impact on them, because after that, they're like, we need you here every year. It's just an open welcome, plan on being here forever. State Fair, even though COVID was still kind of lingering, 100,000 people per day were showing up. So they had some pretty important decisions they were making to try to keep people safe. All clears. We did not know much about all clears. We thought, like, storms go through, we're good. Well, we get these back anvil lightning strikes that would hit and cause some concern there. So we were getting pressure. The lady sitting right next to Marcia was the concert venue safety person. And it was basically like every 5 seconds, like, new scan would come in. How are we doing now? How are we doing now? So that's kind of how it would be with phone calls. And that's why you want to have somebody there to be able to handle that. So I mentioned lightning. We're going to kind of take a tangent into more sciencey type stuff with just things we've learned about lightning. How we build our confidence with it. I think that was the biggest thing, is that we weren't confident in what we were saying or being able to anticipate when it was going to happen. So that's where we tried to learn the most about, what kind of tools are out there for us to use. How likely is it that lightning is going to hit that site or not? And then when is it going to be done? So that's where the on-site person can really handle that and take that burden off of ops. That's why our on-site person is there, so that State Fair isn't calling our office every 2 minutes saying, all right, what about now? What about now? You're the person that's there, and you can help them doing that. So what we found, again, is that the one person per day during the Met Watch period was the most important period. So we would try to nail down exactly when that event needed us. Where are you going to have the most people? When's the weather most likely to be the worst? And that was our core period. But if there was stuff early, we would come in earlier. If there was stuff late, we'd stay a little bit late, depending on how long they needed us. All right, so lightning resources. Again, building confidence in lightning anticipation. One of the things I go back to is my time in Chicago when I worked there. Southwest Airlines would call us and they poke us for Midway Airport. I see you put a quarter-mile fog into your tap there. How, what are the chances? You're causing us business, by having that quarter-mile visibility issue in there. And what they were trying to do was trying to see how confident you were. Like, could they convince you to pull back and say, all right, I'll just bump it up to a mile? You need to have scientific reasoning into what you're saying to the partner. You can't just kind of be wishy-washy about it. So building that confidence, knowing why that quarter-mile fog is there, and being able to stand your ground and say, no, I think that's going to happen, and here's why. So that's where hopefully all these tools will come in handy. This is where my pitch for AWIPS in the cloud, it'd be nice to have all this in one spot so that we don't have to go website to website to try to analyze it. It's nice when we're here in the office, because a lot of these we can kind of put on like a 4-panel or 6-panel to be able to monitor it. But that's just my pitch for long-term weather service stuff. I'm going to go through a few of these. GR2 and the MKX, Chanias and Tom Hultquist made a nice file that if you haven't used those, they give, if you know the speed of your storms, it'll give you range rings depending on how far away they are. I highly recommend having those on your stuff as well. So prob lightning cast, if you're not familiar with this, there's GR2 place files for this. We found this to be very useful to get an idea of what the probability is that lightning's going to occur. There's a lot of bleed over with this, and we know the developers over at Sims, UW. So we talked with them quite a bit about events that we've had, things that have worked out, what's been good, where's lightning cast been good, where's it been bad, things like that. So just yesterday or the day before, we had some storms pop up. One of the things we found is the first contour. If you don't have storms that have developed, that first contour with prob lightning gives you a hint that something's going to develop. So one of the more challenging situations is when you don't have anything on radar and stuff's going to blow up right over your site. It's easy when you've got a squall line half a state away. You can time it out for when that's going to come in. It's most difficult when there's nothing out there. It's going to develop right over your site. You have something that you can say, hey, partner, something might be developing here in the next 30 minutes. So sure enough, there was this blue contour on the left. I think that's the 10% contour that something's developing there. And then 30 minutes later, there was a small little cell that produced some lightning, and it went on to do some more lightning after that as well. If you're not familiar with this, when you're on the LightningCast website, if you click on the aviation lightning dashboards, all the TAF sites across the United States have a dashboard or like a time series for the probabilities of lightning occurring at those spots. They do have a form that I'm testing out for them, that if you have a specific event and you want to know like where it's going to be, and that, Joe, I'll send you it later. If you want a specific dashboard for an area, you can put in a request for it, because sometimes these won't be exactly at your on-site event. So here's what it looks like. If you haven't seen this before, there can be some, again, if it's a really big event, there might be lightning showing up, the probability showing up early and late. This can give you an idea for the all clear. How long has it been since that last lightning strike, or how close has that been? GLM stuff, College of DuPage websites, what we go to. The day cloud phase as well, for overlaying both of that when it starts getting quote yellow, is one of the thresholds that we look at before stuff develops on top of you. If you start seeing some of those signs, that might be a sign, hey, partner, something's coming up here. You can get on the LightningCast page. It was nice. It was probably one of the things we used on Thin Client, but we found Thin Clients unusable. So we haven't been able to use that to be able to put all these on kind of the same spot. But again, gives you an idea if there's flashes or whether or not maybe there's an uptick occurring with the storm. This was from the picture, the first picture, and what's happening in the background here. That was the Green Day concert that happened during the Harley Homecoming last year. This was one where these storms are moving from west to kind of east, southeast, and just skirting Milwaukee. And probably one of the toughest shifts I've had in my life was providing lightning briefings. But all these tools help with my confidence to be able to tell people, hey, this looks like it's going to stay away, you're good to go. Faisala, the thunderstorm manager, I believe every office has an account for this. And Jackie, sorry I didn't get your slide in, your picture from Sheboygan Road America on this. But this is a great tool, again, to try to get an idea of when the lightning ended and then also coming at you. So there's a risk area that they put on here. There's a 10-minute, 20, 30. So that takes in the storm motion and then also where lightning can be. I found it to be a little bit sporadic for when it hits or when it puts these graphs out here. Sometimes it won't have them, but this is from the IMET world. So definitely check in if you have any IMET friends about how they like to use this as well. Again, just another tool in the belt. MRMS has been a big one too, if you're not familiar with this. Isothermal layers, so -10. You're getting 40 on reflectivity. That's the threshold typically for when you start developing ice. So if you can loop this is where this again, the Green Day concert, the venue is just to the north here. Looping this, you see this all just heading more from west to southeast. So again, my confidence was pretty high that, hey, it looks like more of that focus is going to be south of where the venue is. So highly recommend having that up as well. The MRMS page isn't great, but it's something. And then the NASA Sports stoplight. This has been another very good tool for being able to, if you're hyper-focused on one spot, to be able to pick out how long has it been since that last lightning strike was in my area, or is there more developing back? Some of from what we've seen, you hear the lightning, requests where like you're supposed to wait 30 minutes after the event is done. Reality is those events are wanting to get started as soon as possible. So if lightning's outside of that 8-mile range ring and the storms are moving away, more times than not, those events are going to get started unless you're saying stuff's going to backfill into their ring. So just be aware of that. Even though there's this 30-minute timeline, it might be more so what's actually happening lightning-wise and whether that event gets up. But remember, it's not your decision for whether or not they open or stay shut. or stay closed. You're just briefing on the weather. They make decisions based on what you're briefing them when it comes to the weather. Last thing here, if you have the other thing that was good with ThinCline was you had the time of arrival tool, but since we haven't been using that, we've been more so using GR2. And the trick we've done is to ladder it if you've never done this before. So if you know the storm motion, so if you kind of go back and forth and get a storm motion from a cell, if you right click on it in GR2 and do a storm track here, you get this tick marked storm track. So every tick mark is 15 minutes. So that doesn't give you a whole lot of lead time, but if you go to the end of that 1 hour, right click again, you can get another hour's worth of time on the tail end to try to figure out if that's about 2 hours away or how long is that away. So that's kind of the best tool we found in terms of trying to figure out the time of arrival. I used to use like a piece of paper and I try to like draw on the TV and try to figure out like if I moved it, how far away was that going to be. But that's what we found to be the best and most useful in terms of storm track and how far away it is. So going back to the all clears, and just again, some more science. The State Fair Week, 7th and 10th, Chris Dumpf and Taylor Patterson, 2 of our meteorologists, were on site for these 2 events. And one of the trickiest things was the back stratiform area. We were having long flashes and anvil crawlers that were occurring. So warning's done, the storms have moved through, and then you just have this kind of persistent rain on the backside. And you're getting kind of poked by that public safety person again, like, hey, is it done? Is it safe? Is it safe to go back out? The main thing just to stress is to be cautious if you're in that stratiform region, because anywhere back in there, you can get charge built up and you get these longer duration positive strikes that can occur, which can be more dangerous than some of the other stuff on the leading edge. Stay confident. If you see this stuff happening, just be a little bit cautious that that might not be an all clear situation. So this entire stratiform area back behind the line was producing lightning. So unfortunately that was a pain for them, but they didn't want to have people all go back out and all of a sudden this big lightning strike happened and have to pull everybody back in. This was Chris's event. This line of storms had gone through and was pushing down into northern Illinois. And you think you're all clear because the heaviest rainfall is through, but you're still back in that stratiform area. And they had some lightning strikes occur within I think this was a 10-mile radius that we had on the GLM years in the past. So just be cautious with that stratiform region again when this stuff comes through. All right, enough Sioux stuff. Let's get back into our journey, some of the other things. So 2021, we had our Madison breakthrough. We helped out with UW football. 2021 finishes up. We have Ryder Cup. Everything goes smoothly there, and it's been a great year because a lot of our staff members got a lot of experience being on site. So some of the things we learned, I mentioned this already, 1 staff member per day, do the Met Watch period. That's what's more important. We've also found it's best to have one person work the entire event so that they're building rapport with the people that are there. So when we have a 2 or 3 day event, we'll have that same person go there each day so that, like, hey, Taylor, how's it going? They know who's coming in and they've had a day to build rapport with them and know what they're doing. Again, we want the on-site meteorologist taking burden off ops with a lot of questions. That's the main goal and why to be for these bigger events, because they have a lot of questions. We should be answering those. If we don't answer them, they're just going to be looking at their phone and trying to become a meteorologist on their own. Lightning, can't just report it. Try to anticipate when it's happening. Equipment-wise, we tried to use Thin Client. It was laggy. We find that the lightning data was about 15 to 30 minutes late, so we couldn't use that at all. And it was a challenge too because this was when everybody in our office had laptops, so we had to coordinate people using the laptops. If we had too many people using it, we had to bring it back to the office and get it back on the lap. So great now that we have all different laptops here at our office. Staffing, we had to plan this as early as possible. We kind of took a run at it as we were getting more and more involved with events. But the earlier that we planned this out, the better, so that everyone would know what they're doing and who's around. And we also found that outside of summer, we could use just our 3rd day shifter to be the one that goes on site. So the way our current schedule is, we have 3 day shifts. We have an H, an I, and a K, and then 2 E's and 2 mids. And if it was September, through May, that third day shifter is who we were using to be the on-site person. Figure out the core hours. We're trying to be flexible depending on the situation. If you have longer active days, plan to be early, and then plan also to be late. But if it was short, if it was a quiet day, a lot of times, if say you came in at 2 o'clock and it was 9:30 and you had a half-hour drive home or wherever it might be, they would let you out early because everything was going to be quiet as long as you told them, hey, everything is good. All right, so why was it so hard to break in with Milwaukee? So what we learned is that some of those same phone calls that Walleye Weekend was doing, Summerfest started to do. And the response from our office was not favorable for them, and that's lasted. So as I was trying to work my way in with some of these events, particularly Summerfest, I got to a meeting and I met with Bill Wesley, who's the head of security at that time, and he said, yeah, we called the Weather Service back in 2011, and I think we've done it too many times because they told us to never call back. So that's kind of what we're fighting now, is for how many years the Weather Service has told a lot of these people, partners, we can't help you. And now all of a sudden we have to kind of reverse that and say, hey, we can help you now. We're trying to help out where public safety needs us. So we're fighting a bit of that and a bit of history. So just be aware that might be, if you're struggling and trying to break in with someone, just be persistent and try to just make yourself available and try to be there, because people will turn over and you'll get more opportunities to get in. As I mentioned earlier, all it's taken for us to get in with a lot of these events is to have one weather event. State Fair was like 10 in 1 week that we had. So we've solidified ourselves there. Last year, they used to do Harley Homecoming every 5 years, and they set up a big command center where there's police, fire, the HOP, which is like a little train that runs through, all the public safety people that would be involved in a big event like that. We're at the table when that storm went through just south as Green Day was playing down at Veterans Park. We were in with the Harley and all those public safety people in Milwaukee now too. Same with the Summerfest grounds. Rebecca Hansen, she's now lead forecaster at Grand Rapids. She was on site for Mexican Fiesta. They had more storms, and that's where, yeah, I understand why you guys are here. And then Jimmy Buffett, Alpine Valley. This is an outdoor venue where there's no shelter for people. They had somebody get struck in the parking lot during a Dave Matthews Band concert back in 2004, I believe it was. And so they've been very proactive with weather, and they get it as well. We had a enhanced risk day where Jimmy Buffett had to cancel and delay his show a month based on information we were helping them out with. So these are events where we're staples at now, and we don't really have to fight this. All right, so how do we do this? So I've gotten questions from other WCMs. They've seen how many times we've put into chats about events we're supporting on site and the offsite ones as well. The main pushback or the concern from our operational staff has been, am I going to lose all my weekends off? Is this going to take up all our extra time that we get in the summer? We don't want it impinging on that. That's valid concern, and that's why we've tried to work, how do we do this best with being able to support these events and the partners, but also not burn out our staff as well. And kudos to our staff. We've got a great staff here that all has wanted to be on site. Didn't initially start that way, but we want our on-site people to be our ops staff. It can't be the WCM being the hero. We want our on-site people being our ops people. So the important thing is you have to spread the work out. It can't just be one person. That's where you're going to run into the issues with losing more weekends. The way we've done it here is I've given about each staff member about 1 to 4 events for each year that they are the person. So it might be a multi-day event. I try to make it a mix between a summer and a fall or a spring so that, again, it's not overdoing it. And how many events you can do depends on how many of your own staff are interested. So we didn't want to expand too fast. We knew what kind of staff members here were interested in doing it. So that allowed us to be a little bit more flexible with going a little bit more all in right away. So again, we started with early adopters, which was a lot of our staff to begin with. And like I mentioned, we started using the K shift for like UW football games or Harvest Fest, things that were outside of summertime when it might not be as necessary to have an extra body in the office to watch radar when severe weather may not be as likely. So scheduling, we get our events decided on very early. We now know what our main ones are going to be every year. So by February, I've got an idea of what events we're going to be doing and when they're going to be. And I put it on our calendar and I try to pick out who could possibly work on that. So I try to get that settled all before peak leave. The scheduler here, he's keeping tabs on how many weekends are lost by people so that it all balances out as well. He gives me feedback that like, hey, this person looks like they're taking on. Okay, we'll try to shuffle that around a little bit more. We do try to use management, our hydrologists and our OPAL to cover op shifts as well. If somebody's scheduled for a weekend shift, we'll plug in the hydro or myself or Sue or MIC to cover that shift so that that person can go on site instead of working a shift here. So the aim is just for someone to lose one weekend lost per summer. And that's based on our current schedule, which is more so focused on when our forecast concerns are, when our forecast delivery all happens. My vision and our vision here, when the 6 shifts initiative comes out, it's going to be more so about the partners and when our need is for the partners. So what happens in the wintertime for our partners in DSS is different from what happens in the summertime. This is not just simple, like we're giving somebody midnights off because they don't need it. It's more so I need somebody extra during the day, during the evening on the summertime. So instead of working a midnight shift, maybe they should be there in the evening. Wintertime, we got school districts that we're briefing early in the morning. We need more people on the midnight crew. So that's our vision for when that all comes out, is that we're going to look at what our workload is, both with when our partners need us and then also when the forecast stuff comes out, and our schedule is going to fall out from that. So just to give you a view of what it looks like on my end, this is my document that I use. The first one that says 2024, that's how I've split up things through our staff. You'll notice that almost everyone is working on shift. Everyone is working an on-shift site. 2021 to 2024, this is a cumulative document. So I also try to get people to go to different events so that they can see what it's like at a different spot and just kind of get a different taste of what happens and what their concerns are. So the more that we've done this, the more we've been active with what's going on. For our new meteorologists, when they come in, this is our general progression of what we do with them. Is we have them first shadow an event with an experienced meteorologist that has done it before. Then the first deployment would likely be a low stress event, like in the fall or spring, when it's less likely that there's going to be severe weather going on or lightning. And then from that, we'll just kind of increase the workload based on how comfortable they are with that situation. So for training on site, the PCUs are obviously a great shout out to Jackie Anderson, the new WCM at Detroit. She put together an awesome briefing training program for our office, which was guided towards building up confidence in training, in briefing partners. So just the basics and trying to figure out, what kind of things do I need to be briefing on? What kind of things do I need to watch with as I'm talking here, I'm trying to do my ahs and ums and not say that as often, because as part of our briefings, we want to be as coherent as possible too. So she put together a really awesome program for us to build up our confidence in how we talk to our partners. We also at the state EOC. So yesterday, Dan Baumgart and Ken Scow from the lacrosse office, I trained them up on how to be weather specialists at the state EOC as well. Mutual aid. So we've done this a few years. Here's Joe Phillips from Marquette. Had an awesome time having him come down to help us out last year when we needed some help because we had some things come up with a lot of meetings and we needed help for state fair. So Joe came over to help us out. We also had lacrosse help us out for a few events as well. So our decision is we'd rather have people, if you're going to come down from Marquette, Michigan, we want you to get the experience being on site and seeing what that event is like, rather than have you go into the office and do more grid work or whatever it might be. We want you, if you're taking the time to come down and help us out, we're going to stick you in the command post and get that experience. The initial weekends that we chose are the ones where we've got 3 events going on. That's about the max that we've been able to do. So if we can take one of those events away, that's our first target for mutual aid to have somebody coming down. The challenging part is that to count on it from year to year and who can help out, and each office is going through different staffing levels and where they're sending people off. Being able to count on, hey, I've got 3 weekends like this year where we've got 3 events going on, and being able to have somebody come from one of those offices to help out doesn't always happen, and it didn't happen for this year. So we're trying to figure out, how do we rely on this to occur? The other part of it is that it can be expensive. So having somebody travel to be at a site for 3 or 4 days can cost up to about $1,000 per event. Does that make sense to do when we've got somebody that lives closer to an event that they could drive there? It's probably closer to the event than driving to the office. I really think that if you're looking to make a pitch for why you want to keep offices local, this is it. Because coming from a regional perspective, if we had to drive, say in hotels, it's going to be an expensive endeavor to try to do this. Quiet days. So this is a big one of the big things we always hear about from weather service staff. Shouldn't we just be there for when the weather is the most active? Why are we going to be there for the quote quiet days? Which, by the way, never say the Q word when you're in a command post, because the emergency manager might slap you, because always something happens when you say the Q word. So 100%, initial thoughts were 90% of the days we're going to be on site are going to be quiet. When I look back at our last summer, which was one of the quietest summers we've had, it was actually closer to 40% for those events being, quote, quiet. So our advice is just take the win. We get enough kind of people yelling at us that must be nice to be wrong half the time. It's your job. If it's a day where it's going to be sunny and clear, and you tell them it's going to be sunny and clear, and it hits, fantastic. You just build some rapport and some confidence in that partner, that when that bad day comes, they know what's coming, or that they can trust you a little bit because you told them it's going to be dry, and it didn't happen. So the partner side is not going to be quiet. If it's a quiet day weather-wise, there's going to be a ton of people that show up to that. State Fair last year had one of the quietest weather days when Joe was here, and it was 140,000 people that showed up. It was their biggest one-day attendance record that they've ever had. So even on the days when we say 100% nothing's going to happen, the partner still in the back of their mind thinks, well, what if something pops up? They're still thinking about weather and whether or not they're going to have to be a meteorologist today. So having you there, that if something pops up and Joel pops on the radio and says, hey, heads up, something's popping up, then they can come back and think about what's happening weather-wise. Otherwise, if you can take it off their shoulders, take it off, take the win, you build rapport, and people then ask, well, what do I do? What do I do when I'm on a quiet weather shift? Well, treat it like an admin telework day. You're just in a command post, go through your email, look around the United States for other things are going on to try to build up your confidence in what's happening. If you're in a command post where there's nobody else in it, like we are with State Fair a lot of the times, do some training, whatever it might be. But the last thing I'll just say, on these quiet weather days, if it is quiet weather and you're in the office, you'd rather be in the office than on site, do we need 68 people on a daily basis putting together a forecast of quiet weather? Or can we just take 1 or 2 of those people and put them on site? Is that a better use of our time than going through the grids and updating clear skies for 3 days? You need 6 to 8 people doing that. I don't think you do. And you're better off having your time in the command post, building that rapport, doing that. So with that, a couple last slides here. We're maxed out as of this year. I don't think we can take on any more events. We're with the RNC, we're looking at about 120 on-site shifts this year. In a normal year where we don't have RNC, we're probably going to be averaging around 90 on-site shifts. And I know that seems like a lot, and that's why I wanted to do this, start spreading the word about what we're doing to try to get there. Again, this wasn't something that happened overnight. It took years and years and years to build up to get to this point. We have a number of county fairs that probably qualify for this, but we decided not to go down that road because if we did one county fair, it means we probably have to do all the county fairs. And we don't want to upset some of the EMs that are heavily involved with those. So that's one spot that we haven't gone down that road. At this point, too, we're fine-tuning our work through our DSS team. All clears is our big thing for this year to try to get better at. So we're at the point now where we're trying to just kind of fine tune our work that we're doing on site and off site as well. One of probably the best things is, for our ops staff members, they're on a first name basis now with these partners that they go to a spotter training and these guys are showing up there and they're like, hey, how's it going, Taylor? And it's Chris from State Fair. They're getting immediate direct feedback from the partners. They're in the command post. Partners are like, thank you, this is great. A lot of times you might get that through the WCM or through emails, but you're face to face with that person getting that feedback. And for our staff members that have come out of it, they're like, hey, I feel like I accomplished something really good today. I helped them make decisions, and it was something I'm proud of. So last quote I'll end on here. That same meteorologist that back in 2016 that was saying this is getting kind of annoying with all those phone calls from Walleye Weekend, they came to me this year and they asked me, how come you've only scheduled me for one on-site event this year? They're upset that I haven't got them more involved with the event. So I think that kind of speaks to where we've come. And even people that maybe initially don't get it, they come around to it after they hear the rest of the staff talking and see where we're at. So I think this was a great kind of way to be able to kind of show where we've come from. So with that, thanks to our operations staff that's been part of this and been really helping out with everything. We couldn't do it without everybody being involved and part of it. Chris Stumpf, ITO at Indy, was the lead forecaster here. He taught a lot of our staff about lightning and a lot of those tools that we have. We still use that to train our staff on each year to make sure you go through Chris's videos on some of that stratiform rain stuff with the lightning. Jackie Anderson, a lot of stuff pulled from the IMET world to be able to apply to us here. So kudos, Jackie, and the briefing stuff's been fantastic. And Rebecca Hansen, she's a lead at Grand Rapids now. She did a lot of the initial on-site. She was the early adopter for our office to go out there and do that stuff. So thank you to all of them. I know that went long, and I will stop now for any questions and comments. All right, so I'll just read off some of these bike. Weather impacts outside the venue itself. You guys can see that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, things can get overwhelming really quick, and I agree with that. Rebecca, with the ranking system, do you still need to call the events to determine the vulnerabilities, or do you include that in the request form? So that's something that we spent a lot of time up front trying to figure out with that. And I didn't put the scorecard on there. I'll see if I can get back to that page here. So that's part of the partner building with from the WCM side of the house. Sorry, I'm going to make you guys have brain melt here. So the scorecard here, trying to learn some of this was, we did our research. A lot of us are from Southern Wisconsin, so we know these events and the venues and what some of that was. So part of that is having a partner meeting up front to talk with them and find out, like, how long does it take for you to evacuate this? How many tents do you have? Different things like that. What kind of crowd do you have, or what other vulnerabilities do you have? So that initial form that I put up here, that was the initial guess, and then we fine-tuned things from there and figured out which ones were the priority to work with. So first guess, and then kind of tinker as you go. All right, thanks, Matt. I will be quiet if anybody else has any questions or things they want to say. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for this presentation. Awesome stuff here. Curious about in Slack, the events chat room that you brought. I know, like, obviously it's in its fledgling stages. Could you envision, like, thinking a step or two ahead, maybe incorporating huddles into it? Question mark.
Yeah, we started poking around with huddles just to see how well they would work, like on a normal weather event. I think one of the things, again, is just that if it could be something like 4th of July that we would potentially do. I know that, like the Davenport office did Google Meets with their EMs, and that was highly looked upon. I could foresee us doing something similar if we get enough of these people to do it, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get people more comfortable with using this and seeing who's all interested. So to answer your question, yes, I see it as a possibility. Maybe not this year, but again, kind of tinker around and see where we can fine tune and be more efficient with this work.